guys should all have access to the Wormhole Townhall channel. If you don't have access to that, give me a shout. We will be using this to X up if you wish to speak about the topic that's currently going on. And depending on how many people, we may or may not be able to fit you in. Can't go forever, unfortunately. So we will be having about 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes per topic. So if you guys don't have the role, then go to the roles channel, click the little claw. That should give you the ability to actually see the chart.
We'll be starting in a moment. We're just getting people onto here, making sure pings go out, and at about 5 past we'll get going.
This is also being streamed, guys, and it will also be recorded. So if any of you need it back or want to pass it to your own corpse, just hit me up after this.
Just another minute and we'll get started. Okay, right, so it looks like TIS is live. We've got a lot of people in here. Pings have gone out, so we're good. We've got about 67 people, which is quite nice. I just wanted to start by thanking you guys for coming along here. This is a bit of a departure from what you may have seen in CSM talks for the last few years. Going back about 4 years ago, Noobman used to run town halls like this, where we would have the Wormhole community at large come over to discuss various points at the time that were important to the community, to discuss balance, PvP, PvE, really anything that affects wormholes in particular or touches on wormholes with a wormhole-centric viewpoint. So this is going to be a meeting where you guys can all start to bring up your points. There is a channel called Wormhole Townhall, although we'll probably use the request to speak option actually. We'll be giving you guys about a minute or two when we get to these topics and we've introduced them. We'll be giving people a minute or two to talk. We're going to bring you guys up on stage if anyone wants to speak about topics, and you can talk your heart out about anything that's affecting you or your corp, or anything you see as a problem, or indeed something great. This should hopefully then go back to CCP as a way of demonstrating the issues that we all face in wormhole space, things that we want changed, and issues that we all want to look at. Something more than just me writing a blog, something more than any of you guys just writing a Reddit post and showing that it's one person, right? Now, this is about the space that we all live in or all utilize, or even those who perhaps only are tangentially connected to wormhole space. And what I will also say, this was Teddy's thing primarily. He's going to be hosting much of this here. And yeah, but before we get started, I just wanted to start by introducing the CSM candidates that we have with us today. While this isn't going to be a CSM debate, they are here to provide their opinions on the various issues that wormholes are facing. Perhaps that will swing who you vote for. But like I say, it's not a debate. They're going to be giving their opinions and how they feel about different topics. To that end, we'll start with Phantomite. If you could just introduce yourself briefly.
Come to me first. I'm Phantomite. I'm here because I love PvP. I love PvP at an entire range of different sizes, and I am continuing my holy crusade against super large groups in EVE Online and structure spam. And I feel that particularly the structure spam part needs to be addressed properly and fully in all areas of the game, every single piece of space where structures are anchorable. And most importantly, I understand that different areas of space treat structures in different manners. One size fits all doesn't necessarily work, and I think I've got some pretty nifty ideas that aren't special rules for every area of space, but that I think will be interesting to a number of you.
Okay, we've got Kale Kadaru. Could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kel Kaderu of Sound Mind. I would describe myself as a former wormholer. We had been in a C5 up until about a year and a half ago, and are now living out in Syndicate in NPC nullsec. So, as someone who is not really a wormholer anymore, part of what I'm interested in being here for is to get views and updated information from people who've been more active in wormhole space over the last year and a half. And I'll share my ideas, of course, as well, because I still very much care about wormhole space, even if I don't live there right now.
All right, and Mark, who are you and why are you here?
Who am I? Well, I'm Mark. I'm here because I thought this was a debate. So all this dirty press I got on the other candidates feels kind of silly now. Um, I am the executor of Turbo, this Turbo Feeder Glory. We're a C5 alliance living in a red giant. Been out here in J Space since 2019 in some form or another, between the corp that I'm in now and a corp I was in previously. I ran for CSM last year on the Wormhole ticket, got very close. We were 12th, and they only took 10. I make the joke constantly that if Satonia had taken his job at CCP about a month earlier, I probably would have been on CSM 16. But I feel strongly about the issues we have at hand, about the need for representation for our people. And I feel like there are common sense answers to a lot of the things that are issues for us right now. I feel like there is a strong need for better content drivers in wormholes. I feel like there's a strong need for better player retention in wormholes. And I think at the end of the day, we're all out here trying to do this thing and make a difference, because the game is better when it is more fun for more people. And that's the whole basis of my platform. Just trying to make the game as good as it can be for as many people as it can be.
All right, great. So, Alaventi.
Hi everyone, my name is Alaventi, and well, today I am not currently a wormholer. In the past, I was in Hard Knocks back when we lived in pauses, and after that, after I went back to K-Space for a couple of years, I came back and joined MCAV for a couple of years. I am running for the CSM because I have a great deal of experience across all kinds of spaces. And I'm concerned that CCP is going to continue to do things to one space. They're going to have drastic impacts on other spaces. So I definitely have a voice in the room to help CCP understand how a change in one area can greatly affect other areas of space in ways that may not always entirely be obvious unless you spend a lot of time living there.
Great. Steve Ronickham. I think I'll let everyone knows you, but go on.
I'm Steve Ronickham. I do third-party stuff. It's Fuzzwork Enterprises. I don't do wormholes. I have day tripped a few times, but that really doesn't mean anything. I'm mostly here to listen to what's important to you people. And yeah.
All right, great. And then we've got Vincent Tofic Madavada. Madavada, even, something like that.
Now it's perfect. Thank you for pronouncing it correctly, but you can call me Vincent, that's much easier. I'm the German gas guy. I produce boosters, I sell them in Jita, I do special deliveries if you pay me to, and I fell in love with the Wormhole playstyle. I came back to EVE during the one of the lockdowns, and I got straight back into wormholes after some time not being there. And once I found out that filaments were a thing, that someone thought that might be a good thing to not exclude from Mumble Space, I was pissed and also decided to run for CSM last year. Didn't got that up high in the Wormholer ticket, but yeah, I still think it's important to speak about the topics to show that it's common sense and not just fringe opinions. Yeah.
Great, okay. And Stitch, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Stitch Caneland, so I've been living in wormhole space for about 3 years now, and I primarily fly with Tuskers, but I also do a lot of solo stuff. And we live in a C2, so we're more of the low-class area, using it more as a avenue to roam nullsec, but I also roam the chain and stuff like that as well. And for CSM, I'm primarily running more as like ship and ecosystem balance as a whole, so the whole picture. And wormholes are kind of part of that, but it's not a direct thing that I am representing. Obviously, I'd be happy to represent wormholes if I happen to get on there, but I'm not going to muddy the waters for the wormhole ticket this year. So yeah, I'm just kind of the main balance and ecosystem guy at this point.
Right, and Mifune Sword God?
Hey guys, I'm in my car right now. Apologies for that up front, just because I have work here in about 30 minutes. But hi, I am Afune. I am a Goon Swarm nullsec candidate. Um, Unfortunately, not running under the actual Goon Swarm ballot, so don't take that into account. Just where I live in space. I don't have too much experience with wormholes other than using it for travel across New Eden. So I'm here today just to kind of not only learn a little bit more about wormhole life, but learn about how the changes of the past 2 years have affected you guys, and trying to help be that voice towards wormholers, poshing people, just kind of all the other different groups of Eve, and how you guys are feeling about your own mechanics and way of life.
Awesome. Okay, so that's your CSM members with us here today, guys. Like I said, though, this is primarily a public event. It's for you guys to give your thoughts on topics. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Teddy to start the first topic, which is going to be about the history of wormhole space. And then we'll give you guys a chance to speak up. There is going to be a raise your hand icon at the bottom, which will let you request to speak, and we can bring you up to the stage to have about a minute to speak. Depends how many requests there are. You may get a bit longer, may get a little bit less. I'll be mostly moderating, and yeah, take it away, Teddy.
Yeah, alright guys, who wants to talk about the shit we've endured over the last couple of years?
No, it's fucking brutal, Teddy.
Who, come on, because it's been absolute hell.
Yeah.
Great. Stop it with the F-bombs, Mark.
Oh, you're right. Sorry.
Remember last stream.
I forgot we were streaming. You're right. My bad.
So, at least from a Foxholer, like, low-class perspective, Surgical Strike kind of screwed us in the ass. It pretty much led to the death of my own high-class corp, to the point where I then merged into Foxholders.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of crap. I think everyone can agree.
Yeah.
I would honestly say that the the half reversion to Surgical Strike probably wasn't enough, and that more needs to be done. Marauders probably shouldn't have had the plate bonus. But yeah, throw your crests up if you want to add anything, say your piece, etc.
Do you want us to throw our requests up, or other people throw the requests up?
If you wish to talk, Mark, you can talk.
I was gonna say I don't think I have a button for it. I mean, it's one of those things where the issues plaguing JSpace have even though the change happened, right? Like we got bulkheads, the bulkhead change, we got some of those resistances back. We didn't do anything for faxes, and the change has resulted in a big shift in the meta, but the ecosystem out here had already changed up to that point, right? Because so many people had left. I mean, it's no secret that the number of active groups are so they're so much smaller. I think as a whole, there are just fewer groups out here, and even the groups that are out here, the membership is has been lessened over time, either by people flaming out or feeling like they've been disenfranchised from the game. So the bulkhead change feels a little bit like a pittance, oh well, you wanted something, so here's something, without addressing the larger issue of the game has changed in the last year or so, and if we want to make adjustments to it, you have to take into consideration the changes that have happened in that time.
Yep, couldn't agree. Right, Nicholas.
Great, we have to bring him up.
Just invite you up.
All right, Nicholas, if you could just introduce yourself briefly and say what you want to say about the recent history and updates in wormholes.
Okay, so hi. So I'm Nicholas Kirk, Walter Kirk, Eve Kirk, lots of Kirks. Many people may know me, many people may not. I have started my career out in demonic,
one of the first Wormhole alliances, so I'm an old Wormhole player. What I would like to see here today is Wormhole changes, not ship changes. It's like we're here for Wormhole chatting, right? So let's talk about Wormhole changes. I don't care about bulkheads. I helped Mark anchor his Fortizar when he moved to C5 space. I was glad to do it, and I want to do it. I want to help it, but I really think we need to be here to talk about changing Wormhole space, not ship world-class space. Like we need to really, what's going to bring people here? That's all I gotta say. Let's change the topic to wormholes and not world changes. Like Eve universe. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I just
Alright,
quickly jump in on that for a sec?
You can.
Obviously, I am. It should be very obvious that basically all of us in this channel are campaigning for the CSM. But ship and structure balance changes are just as much wormhole foundations as they are in outside of J space. So we're not really going to be able to not talk about structure balance and ship balance changes if the topic is the health of wormholes.
Well, I think part of it too is that you have to consider when we talk about changes to the game, right? You have to be more comprehensive about the total ecosystem as opposed to just any one facet of it, right? So people talk about ship changes a lot because that is, most interactions people have in space are between two different people and two different ships, right? At its fundamental level, the game is, the different ways that people interact with other people in the ships they've chosen and the fits that they've put on those ships. And so that is at a very base level, that is what those conflicts are about. Now, the settings that those conflicts take place in, the factors that are sort of third party to that play into it, those are all relevant and important, and that's all part of the larger ecosystem picture. And there are plenty of if you wanted to just talk about changes to like the mechanics of wormholes, period, that is a whole laundry list of different topics that we could get at, but those changes make a difference when you talk about what kind of doctrines are people running now? What kind of things are effective for home defense? What kind of things are effective in the eviction meta? Like, what are there other play styles that are being affected here that we're not taking into consideration, and we need to be, right? So it's not, I don't feel like as simple as just saying, let's just talk about one thing and only that one thing, when if you want to address the issues that affect all of J space as a whole, and outside of J space too. I mean, we've talked about this. I think pretty much everybody here at some point or another. We're not isolated, right? We feel isolated a lot of times because we're in our own kind of bubble, and a lot of for the most part, there are a wide population in this game that's not going to ever enter a wormhole. But the things that affect us affect other people too. And, the things that affect other people obviously are affecting us. I mean, we talk about surgical strike and complain about surgical strike. That was a change that was intended to fix another issue somewhere else in space, and it's now affecting us. And until we can get to the point where CCP isn't making such broad, sweeping changes to all parts of the game in unison, that's something we're going to have to live with. So being able to find some kind of balance in there is important. And it's also important to consider that, we need to be more fundamental about how we talk about this. We need to be more comprehensive and understand that there are a lot of different things that play into it. All of those will need to be addressed.
Okay,
if I'm able to chime in real quick, but I can see where the frustration lies with a lot of players, right? Because for almost 3 years now, we've had nothing but changes, nerf. There's nothing new. There's nothing fresh. It's always about fixing something rather, it's always putting the Band-Aid over something rather than introducing something exciting. And
can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
I can definitely see where that frustration is, and a lot of players feel the same way. I'm sure all the other CSM 17 candidates can agree that a lot of people have just gotten fucking bored because it's just, oh, this week Marauders are the best, and then fucking next week they're going to end up changing that, and it's going to be something completely different, right?
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Right. Can I, this, as much as I would like to listen to you guys debate, this is not a debate. Lily, can you request yourself to speak again? Thank you.
Oh no.
And thank you, Nick, for kind of saying your piece.
Hi. So I guess one of the big questions I want to ask a lot of the CSM members here, and going forward, one of the biggest things that you saw come out recently is the structure timers. Now, K-Space, they're just as they've been, just reduced, but with wormholes, they've now turned into an almost dinner bell that is basically someone comes, hits your stuff, you now have about a day to get your shit together, or come tomorrow morning or a day after potentially, it's gone. And we've all seen these groups come through. Sure, it's a fun way to get a fight, but smaller groups I've seen, a couple that I've even gotten messages from, they get hit, they're afraid of losing all their stuff because they think it's an eviction force. Even if there's no hole control, you don't know if someone else wanders in. How do you guys feel about it?
The most important issue that caused this change in vision and design for these structures is, and we all know this, is the absolutely unholy spam of citadels for the past 6 years, mostly through the rest of space outside of J space. I'm not saying that J space doesn't have a problem with spam in some situations as well, but I know that in J space it's not the same level of just an absolute metropolis of structures. But the most important thing is that there are different rules in systems for how combat works, for how structure sieges works, for the effect that it has, and for people's ability to turn up. Now, I definitely am not a fan of the idea of structures being different depending on which system they're in. But I think that it is difficult to get a good balance that will be reasonable for all areas of space, have the same rules, but still have it be reasonable for all areas of space. But personally, I think that the answer to this is a two-tiered type of structure locations. Like something that I've been considering for the past few weeks is the idea that, for instance, let's take the Astra House as the example here. Right now, we've just gone through a series of nerfs of the defensive and capabilities of Upwell structures.
Can we give
And
you 30 more seconds, Phantomite?
Sure, yeah. I think that the ideal answer for this is to have two places structures can be anchored. One place is anywhere, and those structures are going to have terrible defensive capabilities. And I think that the other place should be a few limited, predefined spots where structures can be much stronger. And I think that would help in wormholes a lot.
All right.
Great.
Thank you, Lily, for raising that point. Cyrus, come on in.
Could I maybe just have a little answer to that? Not to bully Lily, actually.
It looks like we lost Cyrus there.
No,
oh, sorry. Okay, Okay, if I could just say something real quick, just going forward with the topics, by the way, for any of the any of the people who come up to the stage, if you do want to ask any questions of a candidate, if you could name the candidate, please, just to make sure that we keep things short. It's not intended to be a debate, but the CSM candidates are here to give their thoughts on specific topics. Wins in the essence of time. We'll come back to more structures later. We have it as a specific topic, okay?
Sure.
Cyrus, I'm going to give you a minute and a half from now.
Sure. So I guess from my point of view, the way I see wormhole space is there's two reasons why people come here in the first place. One is PvP, and the other is the income. Now, the reasons why people may come or go in terms of PvP is going to change depending on the PvP landscape in the space. So lots of people have been complaining about surgical strike and faxes and stuff like that, and that obviously has to be balanced against the rest of space. And the other is the income generation, and how those two tie together to make wormhole space more alive is going to be very important, I think, for the future of wormhole space in general. So, for example, people have said that when moon mining allowed for all types of mineral, or made it more profitable for people to mine in wormholes rather than other parts of space, people really came to wormholes, and that gave a lot of content. When people were able to use a very well put together fleet containing different capital ships, where ships were not going to be volleyed off grid because the resists were so low and because the DPS from other ships were so high, I believe the PvP landscape in wormhole space was very vibrant and fresh. So I think focusing on those two topics to address the difficulties that have been going on in wormhole space is where we're going to see the most success in helping wormhole space recover from where it's gotten and turn it into something that we all greatly enjoy flying in and get more people back into wormhole space.
All right, cool. That's about 1 minute and 3/4. Thank you very much, Cyrus. I'm going to drop you back down again.
Next up, Victor.
After Victor, we're going to have a shift to a new topic. So, Victor, your thoughts on the changes in wormhole space recently, the last year or two?
Yeah, I mean, like from my perspective, right? Like I used to be a member of Hard Knocks, and I used to FC for them, right? So more like high-end wormhole space PvP. I mean, it's obvious that like surgical strike and gap changes have been very detrimental, right? Like for example, for me, I took a long break from the game because heavy armor brawls were what I kind of played the game for, and those just died after fax nerf and surgical strike. But I also feel like a big thing, like a problem with wormhole space, is that like until now it's been a very like most fights that happen in wormhole space, like brawls, were like honor fights, right? Honor brawls, and they're still fun, but I feel like there's a lack of like organic like chances for PvP escalation other than really evictions, right? Because other stuff you have like you can gank people on the side, but it's just a farm. Most of the guys is gonna die, and there's nothing fun coming to that. So how do you guys feel about like, for example, the buff chain idea, where instead of like small sites that are very safe if people run solo, you have bigger, harder sites that force people to go in there with a fleet, right, through a gate, so it's limited to numbers, etc., which really is a big like driver for organic PvP engagements and buff chain as people fight over those sites to be able to make that income.
Was that a rhetorical question, or was that aimed at
it was
any of the candidates?
actual question, right? Like,
which candidate were you aiming at?
Anyone really? I mean, mainly like the big wormhole candidates, right? Like Mark and Stitch.
Well, we've heard a lot from Phantomite, so Mark, if you want to pick that up.
Yeah, I mean, so from a basic point of view, I see and I want to kind of couple this with what Cyrus said a moment ago too. I think the important thing that we need to maintain going forward is that the potential content drivers for JSpace have consistently been areas where there is a chance to make a big amount of money, right? I mean, right now, we've complained at length over the last couple of months and years about the fact that the biggest content drivers outside of eviction content and timers are crabs, right? Because crabs have the big money and the big kill mails, and the reason they're there in the first place is because they want to get that big dollar in the first, themselves. So introducing new and creative options for content generation that will bring people out because they want the money, and also bring people out who want to hunt those people who want the money, or find ways to break up their income stream for honor reasons, or just because they like the blue loot or whatever. I mean, that's something that we need to be. That needs to be like if you're talking about ways to both retain players and bring players back to JSpace, has to be near priority number one. I mean, fixing fundamental issues about the way we do PvP, extremely important. I think it needs to be something that we address immediately, but at the same time, if we want to talk about the long-term health of the game and the long-term scope of, finding a way to create bigger sites that kick out more cash and require have a certain increased danger to them, both for the people who are involved in running those sites and for people who are trying to go after those fleets. and other things that you can, we'll talk more about this later too, because I know this is a topic that's going to be coming up. Other structures, things you could implement inside people's homes that they would be, cause them to fight over because of their value. Those are things that we need to focus on. And it's the fact of the matter is, JSpace is the most lucrative part of space right now. If you are a solo player, if you're a group of players, you can make a ton of money out here. I think we need to maintain that as part of our identity, and also because it creates an environment that drives a lot of, like you've said before, pretty remarkable content just by virtue of people interacting with other people who are trying to get the same resources that they're trying to get. So I agree with you. I think it needs to be a priority. It needs to be something that we address with the developers. It needs to be something we can find additional creative options for to either bring people back to JSpace, retain people in JSpace, or bring in new members or new people to JSpace who had not been entered before.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mark. So we're going to change topics now, guys. We're going to go on to PvE in Wormhole space, although we've just been talking about that in general. So for the start of this, I'm going to get Wins to introduce PvE and just talk a little bit about what PvE in Wormhole space is like, and the general topics we may want to discuss. As before, if you just raise your hand if you want to speak. So Wins, if you tell us about what's PvE in Wormhole's like.
Yeah, sure. Let's get to the most beloved topic of some nullseekers, the Wormhole PvE. All about crabbing, the blue loot, the gas, and what we should delete C4, the PvE. Of course, we have to get nerfed, at least that's the public opinion, because if you look at the MER, we do have a lot of blue loot sold. That's quite dang ticks. All the high-class people, they talk about how much they get per hour, the good old ISK per hour everyone brags about, which is apparently the highest in Wormhole space with no risk at all, of course, because everything's safe, no one can roll into you. We all know that. Yeah, apart from that, of course, some people care about gas. I do. Some people just do it on the side. I don't think it's really a main thing for many people in Wormhole space. It may be a main source of income, but it's not like people enjoy actively looking for gas sites and having them. Yeah, and then of course for PvE we also have the difference how you do PvE. You have your farmholds, you have your home sites, and the hole you actually live in. Some people don't have home sites because they day trip. But of course you also have the static crabbing as you go into the actually replenishing or at least rollable statics and look for content there. Some people choose to go into the 13s and use some confessors to get the blue loot, which is actually kind of beginner friendly. And do we have to talk about rock mining? I don't think so, because no one does it, at least seriously.
Awesome, thank you, Wiz. Up next, Davak, a minute and a half, if you please.
Awesome, thank you. So this question is directed towards Steve and Phantomite. Yeah, you've been on the CSM before. We have all these ideas for addressing the problems with PvE in the Wormhole space, like switching up the C4 sites, or specifically trying to encourage dreads out in space by putting scram towers out, or adding more loot to the Avengers to make them more appealing. How reasonable are those requests of CCP? Like, what is it like internally? Like, obviously, I know you guys are NDA'd, but are giving them those kinds of ideas helpful? Is that the kind of stuff they'll actually implement? Like, what kind of scope of ideas should we be looking to provide to them to make these changes? Because obviously, a whole PvE rework is going to be out of the question. That's a lot of dev time, a lot of resources. Like, how do you think there's a possibility of them actually listening to this, or is this kind of just in vain? Thank you.
I'm going to throw this one to Steve, because you've been CSM for what seems
5
like
terms,
eternity.
yeah.
Not for the last 2 years. But yeah, it always comes down to a dev team having the time to go and look at stuff. So yeah, the smaller scope stuff, like adding something to a loot table, that is probably fairly easy for them to get done. changes like adding things to specific sites, those are a little more troublesome just because the tooling for doing stuff with sites is apparently an absolute fucking nightmare. But yeah, it's always going to be beneficial for this kind of stuff to be around for CCP to know about. It's all effectively low-hanging fruit, but low-hanging fruit is kind of stuff which is easier to get done. It's not nice that you can't get something bigger done, but having tables of, we would like you to do this list of stuff, any of it, please, it's always useful to be able to throw at people.
Awesome, thanks, Davak. Phantomite, do you want to add anything, or do you pretty much agree?
Yeah, well, I've been on the CSM for 1 year, and given that it was, I've been on for 1 year, so I had to learn how to interact with CCP, and I felt that by the end of it, I had figured out the right ways to present evidence, possibilities, pain points to actually get them to start paying attention to certain things. I was told in my run up to CSM 15 that I was told not to bother trying to get CCP to even bother looking at any significant changes to infrastructure, to upwell structures at all. I was told by people who said that I just wouldn't get listened to. I was told by people in quite an angry tone that I shouldn't do it, which should tell you a lot about the kind of people and their interests. In the end, about half of the changes that CCP have been coming out with, notably, I'll say, not the removal of an entire timer, are things that I had suggested to them. So I don't think it's impossible to get things done, big things done. It just needs to be presented correctly.
I will need to cut you off in the essence of time, I'm afraid. Up next, Dewey, and thank you, Davlak.
All right. This is. I'm sorry about the noise in my background. I do not have a different option. But Vincent, you said that rock mining is not something that is done in Wormhole. I think maybe that's something that could be worked on and be a very good content driver, as with the new changes to the siege mechanics. Maybe that is something to look forward to. I just really wanted to have said that.
Awesome. Do you want to retort, Wiz? Or perhaps he's AFK.
I will if you want.
Go ahead, Mark, if Wiz is
Cool.
AFK.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one more thing, right? And again, this is another thing we're going to talk about at more length later when we talk about the need for other avenues of content generation to try and move us further away from the eviction meta, and more towards a more balanced, more comprehensive, more fun ecosystem where we can do more things and aren't kind of pigeonholed into defending, evicting, attacking, those just that, very brief kind of or very, narrow kind of viewpoint. But yes, I mean, the fact that our moons are the worst in the game is kind of a kind of nonsense. The game is, they have tried to balance certain ecosystem things by just giving straight up nerfs to some parts of space in order to balance out resource generation. What that's done is it's driven people away from those regions of space, and for an ecosystem that is so dependent on having an active player base, an active player base that is both the the prey and the predator prey relationship, that has hurt us perhaps more than other regions of space, just by virtue of how much smaller we are and how much more we are affected by large shifts in demographics, right? So the fact, if we were to talk about reworking those sites and reworking our moons to give us either better mining or more consistent mining, or more valuable rocks, or whatever the form that takes, that's inevitably going to bring people out here, because there is value in mining here in a way that you don't have elsewhere in space, because we if the value is there, people will be here, and we want to be able to, we want to be able to stress the importance of. Sorry, you're good.
Wiz is back now. So, Wiz, can you just look at a minute?
Yep.
And then we'll move on because I've got 2 people that want to speak, and we're running out of time for this topic.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer about that is that we don't want to have rockels in space because rockels are the optimal mining platform, but we want rockels in space because people actually want to have a full mining fleet out because mining would make sense. And oracles would be nice because they're really big targets, but if you have a full mining fleet out with barges and an orca, maybe even a porpoise, that's quite a lot of ore you can get, quite a lot of big kill mail. And if you got a porpoise full of compressed gas that's filled to the brim, there's also quite a big payout you can get. And we shouldn't try to make the rockels strong again, but we should make the spawns actually enough to have it make sense that you need a full mining fleet set up to do that. And currently, personally, I just wouldn't really put out a porpoise unless many people are for a change on a cloud with me.
Awesome, thank you, Wiz. Serg, come and say your piece.
Oh, hello all. I think Wormhole for making PvE, one first problem I see is capital escalation and easy calling with escalation. One side is fun, but this is not so dangerous for who calling. Need think about how to change this, not hurt who like drop memes or and for who farming in the wormhole in C5 or C6. Maybe need add some interactive. Maybe need add some NPC to wormholes or a sleeper mining memes in a mining space for give not so empty wormhole space, but also need to think about how to make difference, good difference, than use sub-capital, good ships, Marauder and capital ships for giving more ISK and ISK reward, ISK danger reward.
Gonna need to cut you off, Serg, in the interest of time, I'm afraid. But thank you. Alright, old man Tib, come on.
Oh boy. Okay, so I have this is a question actually for everybody. I realize this might not be able to happen because of time, but so we have been beating a dead horse about a lot of these issues for I would say 5 to even 6 years to a certain extent in terms of some of the issues that we've come through. We didn't get surgical strike reversion. We didn't even get a surgical strike fully reversed. They just did it halfway as more of a, I guess, a pander towards the issues that we've been screaming at them about. So in the interest of this, I would actually like to know what each one of your thoughts are in terms of how to convey what you think is the best way to convey information to CCP and how to resolve conflict when it comes to issues that when it affects ecosystems that is outside of its intended scope. I guess the classic example is changing whenever they changed Hectors to This is before, unrollable frigate hulls, but when they changed Hicks to, in their mass issues, and we were unable to roll frigate hulls for a long time, and it took them, quite a while to fix that. I guess another example would also be faxes, changing a huge meta shift because of the faxes. Anyway, that's what I would ask.
So I would I'll go through what I've experienced already. So anyone not aware, I've had a few things implemented in the game since 2015. I know 6 to 7 things so far. So and that's just through Reddit posts. I haven't been on the CSM or anything like that. The main things that seem to get through the CCP are things that historically we've seen in the past that have worked, or at least as how they've balanced the game before, or how they've made changes to the game. Things that are relatively simple, things that are again straightforward for them. And as far as balancing or arguing changes for wide areas of space, it needs to be primarily based on facts. Numbers seem to help a lot. So if you're trying to provide an example to say, hey, this is wrong, or it shouldn't be this way, you provide the initial numbers of saying, this is what it is now, this is what it needs to be because of X reason. And as far as like the Hick changes and fax changes, I think the issue there was that we just didn't have a subject matter expert available on the CSM to say, hey, these things are going to happen, or maybe they just weren't loud enough to say these are going to affect other spaces than just the area you're targeting.
Awesome.
To add, yeah, definitely. And numbers are what you use to wave at CCP, and having someone who can. You want someone from Wormhole Space on the CSM because it's useful for we're going to change this. And then someone going, but yeah, you need a subject matter expert for that, because I've got no fucking clue about a great deal of this stuff. Like the Hick change, yeah, it's not the kind of thing which is immediately obvious unless you're building holes.
Yeah,
Right.
in my notes, we are the one space that is most different, I think, to others. We always seem to get the short end of the stick because, mass. Who needs that? Oh, yeah, we do. And yeah, every time we touch that, basically, we just get it wrong.
Mark, you got like 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Teddy, how many tunes did you guys lose in Outfox when they made the subscription changes?
Probably about 100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, CCP is financially driven, right? Like they're at least more and more. It's become obvious that they're trying to meet a bottom line, and they're making changes to the game to try and meet that bottom line. The fact that they rolled back the subscription changes even a little bit so quickly is a sign of that they are now in kind of a panic mode because things didn't work out the way they wanted them to. It just needs to be a realization. We need to be upfront and frank with CCP that if they want to bring more people out into space, they have to do things to make the game more engaging for more people. And especially in J space, where people are willing to spend a lot of money and a lot of time playing their game, they need to be realistic about the changes that they need to implement and changes that they need to perhaps reconsider implementing if they want to be able to keep people out here both paying their subscriptions and buying Plex.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Nick, come on up here. And then after Nick, we are going to be moving on to scanning, exploration, and unique wormhole features.
Did
Yes.
you skip over me?
Sure.
Sorry,
So yes,
go ahead, Nick.
One of the things that was brought up was the balancing of mining. And I do believe that if we made a few things a little bit more juicier, mining in wormhole space versus nullsec would bring more players into wormhole space. It does sound simple, and it might just be that simple because that's content. More miners to gank. It's just more content. Sorry, go ahead.
So real quick on the previous thing, data is great, data is important, but the thing that hasn't been said, I don't think, which I think is the most important thing, is to share information with CCP that they don't already know. Like, not gonna lie, they already know that lots of people are unsubbing. So telling them that, while important, is not going to be the most effective way to get things changed. You're looking for things that they don't already know, things that they haven't thought of. So it's really like the unexpected things. look for side angles into issues, things that they would not already have considered, and that's where you're going to find the most success, I think.
Awesome, thank you, Cal. Wiz, I believe you wanted to say some stuff on the scanning side of things. Go ahead and next up, guys, if you want to say your piece on this shit too, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Sure, let's get to the next topic. Mass. I want to scan and count mass. All the things special about wormholes. There have been many hot takes in last year's election campaigns. Talking about wormhole generators, mass manipulating structures and modules. Very many weird things were proposed. I don't think they had that much success, but we heard you here if they do have. Do we want to change? Do you want something to change? I think we're pretty not really happy about change. The Orca and the Porpoise could have been changed, but were then removed. Could have been different kind of rolling. Apart from that, nothing much happened. And then, of course, we have one of our favorite topics, also during last election cycle, the freak holes and how we would change them. Because let's just say, for many people, they aren't that nice.
Awesome. Thank you, Wiz. Victor, come on up.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, there's been one major, like, kind of controversial change as far as like wormhole mass and wormhole rolling has been concerned over the last years, right? And it was the infamous Friggle changes. I just wanted to like hear the main candidates' opinions on that. Do you think it's a good change? Do you think it's a bad change? And do you think are other things should change about wormhole rolling? And like elaborate why as well, please, right?
Yeah, I mean, high sec rolling or high class rolling, the fact that that was brought back into balance is good. I mean, it seems like an obvious thing, especially having now lived here for a couple months. I can tell you right now that while I was in a C4, I didn't think it was that important. I didn't understand why it was such a big deal. But now, understanding what a joy it is to blast carriers through holes, the one past them is kind of a religious experience for me in my life right now. As for the frick hole change, we've talked, at length about this over and over again, and you walk a really delicate line when you talk about these sort of things, because depending on who is listening, they're going to think that you're trying to hit a certain angle, right? People who have traditionally lived and worked with more power or more I would say more active groups that run more eviction content and have participated in more of those sort of things, they generally dislike frig holes because it is an uncounterable piece of the meta, or rather a functionally uncounterable piece of the meta. It is not without counters, but there are certain aspects of it that are extremely difficult to deal with and require some very specific adaptations that a lot of groups just don't have access to. At the same time, people who are generally in more defensive groups love them because they give them an opportunity to make use of huge stockpiles of home defense ships for very little effort on the part of the defenders. As if a freak hole pops during an eviction, a lot of times that's the end of the eviction. There's no way around it. We've talked at length about ways that you could balance that so that it's not, crippling to groups who might have to rely on those kind of holes. We've talked about ways that you could balance it so that it is not as oppressive for people who are trying to crab. We've talked about it as, a million different ways to Sunday, and they're not going to get rid of freak holes. Although I'm sure some people would love that.
Just finish up, Mark.
Will do. The idea that perhaps they could roll or have those holes spawn in end of life, so that they will be collapsing soon, but you don't know exactly how long they will collapse. Make them still available to defenders, but not as sure thing, and certainly not lasting for 10, 15 hours. I think those are valid options and things that we would need to talk about going forward.
Awesome. Cal, you had some stuff to say on this.
Yeah.
I'll throw the next topic in the town hall for people that want to mix up for that as well.
So again, trying to be fairly quick here. I feel like most wormhole space groups, in my own experience and from when I've talked to people, fall into either the role category or the scan down a chain category. And there's some overlap there. But that's something that I think it's important for us to keep an eye on and make sure that it stays viable for groups to be in either of those modes. On Friggle specifically, an idea that I can't take credit for, but I really like, is if we could change those frigate holes from always going out to nullsec and bringing in the K-space hordes to instead going somewhere else in wormhole space. I've been involved in, I think, 5 evictions since the changes. 4 of them have had a frigate hole spawn to nullsec, and in, I want to say, 3 of those, it completely just ended the eviction. And like, it didn't cause a fight. It just forced the attackers to instantly stand down because there were now dozens, or in one of the cases, hundreds of nullsecers in the hole. Now, I am a nullsec dweller now. I don't think this is healthy.
Awesome. Thank you, Cal. Right, we're going to move on to the next topic, guys, which is PvP. A lot of stuff has happened with PvP over the last couple of years. The message has changed. If you have stuff that you want to say, bring up. But I believe to kick off, Alvienti wanted to say some stuff.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a real quick introduction for Wormhole PvP. I want to say that one of the things that attracted me to Wormholes was the PvP. You know, I moved back into Wormholes because I was tired of being dropped on and siloed on in K-Space. I love the mass mechanics. I love that there are finite limits, except in the cases Cal pointed out, with frigate wormholes to the number of people that can join in on a fight. I think wormholes have genuinely some of the best mechanics for PvP. And it's unfortunate that in some cases, ship balance, such as in the cases of faxes, have really gotten in the way of that being realized.
Cool. Right. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up? Otherwise, I'm going to go into a rant.
Oh, is that so?
Cool. So, I do quite like PvP at the moment. However, I am a dirty fucking low secker. Not low secker, low classer.
Trash.
Yeah, pretty trash. As I mean, we are foxholers.
Sorry, I hot mic'd. I don't know what that was about. My bad.
But yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with the current general aspects of at least low class brawling. Not massively loving the state of Marauders Online. I feel like they are pretty overtuned, and the Marauders patch could probably get balanced down a bit.
Yes.
Do we have anyone to talk about? Anyone raising their hand right now?
Yeah, we've got some people. Cyrus, come on in.
Yeah, I think you said it also before, Teddy, that the plate bonus on Marauders really, really makes them very strong. But a couple of other things that really make them strong that can be addressed tangentially is one, the shortened Bastion cycle can make them very difficult to kill before they're able to receive reps, and then as well the T2 ammo bonus combined with the DPS bonus of the Bastion module also makes them really strong. One thing that could possibly be done to reduce the oppressiveness of a Marauder while also reducing the oppressiveness of a ship like the Nighthawk is reverting the T2 damage buff. Just an idea for the CSM candidates up there.
That would be the dream. Right. Thanks, Cyrus. Anemone, come on up. And Tib, where did you go?
Just before we carry on, we've got, I think Ithaca Hawk should be on. There we go. Ithaca, I'm just going to drag you onto stage as well. Ithaca is another CSM candidate.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, Ithaca, if you want to just, before Anemone gives their little talk, Ithaca, if you could just briefly just introduce yourself, having just popped in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, hi guys, I'm Ithaca Hawk. I currently fly for Volta. I've been playing EVE for about 12, 14 years now, and probably a good 2/3 of that, maybe more, have been spent in wormholes. I was in Calacan United. I was in Overload This, Isogen 5, and AFK. Wormholes have always been some of my favorite parts of EVE Online, especially high-class wormhole space. It's been fantastic. But I left it left it a while ago now because the content just wasn't what I was looking for anymore. I don't market myself as a wormhole candidate, but I do say I'm wormhole aligned, and I would love to see strong wormhole representation on the CSM this year. I think it's really important for wormhole space to be acknowledged as its own space and balanced for accordingly. So thank you for having me. Apologies for my tardiness.
That's all good. Thank you very much. Anemone, this is the wormhole PvP topic. You've got a minute and a half.
All right, thank you. So one thing I do agree with is that Paladins, I mean, Marauders in general are overtuned, especially Paladins, because Paladins go burr. Was in a Laser Hawks fight recently that showed that really well. But one thing I do love about Wormhole PvP that I think it should be increased in priorities is the vast amount of roles that we see here in Wormhole space compared to Nullsec. In Nullsec, you basically fall into one of three groups: Special Snowflake, F1 Monkey, or Tackle. Well, here in Wormhole space, we have E-War Specialists, we have Boosters, we have FCs, we have Logi and everything. The roles in Wormhole spaces are a lot more diverse that we can use in PvP fights, Balgorns, and all that stuff. So that's something I would like to continue to see pushed forward, is those unique roles that we can see in Wormhole PvP that don't work in those N+1 nullsec fights.
Awesome. Thank you. Come on, Tib, you old boy.
Oh boy, I get more time. Okay, I would like a 30-second spiel from each of you, if time permits, to describe the state of either the current meta of Wormhole space, your opinions of it in terms of PvP, or if you're unfamiliar with it, which I know a couple of you are, describe to me where you think the state of brawling and brawling mechanics are for small to mid-gang fights. Thank you.
I can answer either of those effectively.
Yep.
I'll take the first one for sure. I don't know if time will allow for the second.
30 seconds, Mac.
Thank you. The state of PvP is in flux right now. I mean, there's no way about it. Groups that have traditionally flown a lot of the T3 meta for the longest time, either Ham Legions or Arty or Ham Lokis, or in some cases Tengus, or a lot of those groups who have flown Nighthawks are starting to transition to heavier builds just by virtue of the bonuses that we get from large plates and large shield extenders now. Those are still strong comps, and people are still going to be flying those, especially groups that have invested a lot of skill points into them. But on a day-to-day basis, I'd say most comps in fleet versus fleet engagements.
You're out of the time now, Mark, I'm afraid. 30 seconds is not a long time.
Just to clarify, I would what I'm asking is like what your opinion is on whether or not it is a healthy or an unhealthy state.
Oh, okay. It's fine. Could be better.
Cool.
I guess I'll briefly add in my opinion then. PvP as a whole, I think it varies widely depending on the situations. I would say when you can actually find fights, it's decent, but as a whole, I would say it's trending more in an unhealthy direction. And then as far as my opinion on brawling, whether it's small scale or large scale, or in your case, you were mentioning more like a small gang scenario, I don't think brawling is in a healthy place right now, just for a variety of different reasons, but we can get into that later.
Cool. Fansmite, do you want to go next?
Fortunately, I'm currently dealing with a little bit of drama at the moment, unfortunately.
Sure.
Sorry.
Avianti, do you want to go?
Yeah, so I think that there are certainly a lot of adjustments that can be made. I would lean towards it's unhealthy. And as far as brawling, there really isn't an advantage today to brawling when you can stay at range and use electronic warfare and mobility to not get shot.
Awesome. Nice and succinct. Cal?
Yeah, I'm in a bit of a weird place with this question because literally an hour ago I was in a nullsec brawl at like actually brawling, which was great fun and was excellent, but happened at least in part because one of the groups involved was full of new players. So that's the thing that's skewing my thinking here. I would say overall amongst experienced pilots, relatively unhealthy, and it gets healthier the more newbie involved you get.
Awesome. Ithaca. Don't forget you're muted.
Yeah, I think the way Kale said actually was quite succinct, to be honest. It doesn't scale very well. I'm not super familiar with the meta currently because, as mentioned, I don't currently live in Wormholes. Last time I lived in there, it was 2019, 2020, and the Shacks Online was the thing. I do think that Wormhole space currently suffers from not enough caps in space. There's not very many reasons to bring caps to fights. They just get flattened by paladin blobs at the minute, as Mark can attest to. So I think it's very much in flux, and it should be given some attention. Like I would like to see, for example, allow faxes in W space to say combat refit, and then take away capital ancillary cap boosters. So you could go back to like regen, refitting, and stuff like that. Doesn't break K space, and it makes Wormhole space much more interesting again. That's just a sort of post-it note idea.
Awesome. Thanks, Ithaca. Phantomite.
I want to point out, there's a number of things that are affecting lots of areas in the game, including J space as well. And I want to circle back around to Marauders again, being that Marauders don't have to make a whole bunch of choices at the moment. And I think that that's the key to putting them into a better place rather than the current new role that they've assumed on top of already having another great role. The new role they've assumed is simply better plated battleship than the previous options, and that's not okay.
Awesome. Right. If no one else wants to come and say their piece, we will move on, and we will to battleships and balance. I believe Stitch, you wanted to bring some stuff up for this.
Yeah. So we'll kind of keep with the theme of time here. Obviously, we've been kind of hinting and poking at Marauders and how they're faring. Looking past Marauders, the rest of the battleships, I think, are in a relatively decent spot. There's always going to be some exceptions that stand out, but battleships by default have some penalties associated with them, especially T1 faction pirate. Again, everyone can point out maybe one or two exceptions that are kind of above the average, but in general, most of the other battleship comps are in a decent spot. Even looking at blops, they're in a decent spot with the plate changes. We're not seeing doctrines of blops. So if we're going to now talk about Marauders, kind of echoing on what Phantomite said, Marauders never should have gotten the plate changes. The issue with Marauders is the same issue that is plaguing heavy assault cruisers or hacks. It's that these are T2 ships which are supposed to be specialized in a role, and these ships are not specialized in a role. They are just straight upgrades to everything else. There is no specialization happening. They're just I'm the best ship in this class, and that's that. So, and especially in Marauders, there's no real way to effectively punch up to them without just massing a number of people. So that kind of creates its own barrier within the meta. And so the main takeaway here is that to address Marauders particularly, and Marauders did need changes. I'm not saying that we need to revert Marauders back to their useless state that they were before. They did need buffs. They did need changes because in the past they just were not useful ships. But to scale things back to where Marauders are the quote unquote good PvE ship that CCP wanted them to be, they need to be able to specialize around that, and they need to have some kind of penalty to being the best PvE ship by not being the best PvP ship as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Stitch. Drac, get on. Yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of came here to agree with Stitch. You know, I think Marauders are great at PvE. CCP stated they want them to be sort of the king of PvE, which, I mean, they are right now. But the real big issue with them is they're also sort of the king of PvP. And there needs to be some nerfs to them that can affect their king of PvP status without, you know, nerfing them back to not being used for anything. You know, whether that's nerfing the E-War resist, extending the Bastion time, maybe making some nerfs on the MJDs as well, so that they can't just, you know, disappear out of sights. All of these would be great things, I think, for Marauders. End of rant. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
While we
Phantom wanted to just make a comment.
Very brief one. I think that several things need to change, but one thing that I'm trying to figure out and discussing with people is if it's a good idea to recommend that in Bastion, Marauders can't use any form of E-War, including tackle modules, so that they have to have some form of another ship to assist them with that.
Cool. Mark, I believe you wanted to make a comment as well.
No, I was just telling Drac hi. We're good.
Oh.
I mean, I have
too hard.
Yeah, sorry. I'm gonna beat his ass later. No, I mean, I have a bunch of different things I could say about this, but I think a lot of them kind of fold back into, you know, issues with, or the more general issue of sweeping changes that have affected things that maybe they did not consider. I mean, this is a systemic issue. It's not something that's new, and we've talked about it. I mean, this is the dead horse that we are beating right now, and have been for a while. And you know, whether that be, you know, making changes to the way Bastion works, like Stitch has talked about in the past, or limiting the kind of you know, all tools in one that Phantom just mentioned. Hard to say. I mean, some people have also suggested removing the you know, the plate buff and removing the T2 ammo buff for those holes specifically. Whether, you know, any one of these things or all of them together are the answer, I don't know currently, but I think that it is certainly something that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later.
Cool. Thank you, Mark. Ithaca, I believe you wanted to have a comment as well.
Yeah, thanks. I was actually just about to type back to you and say, no, it's fine. I think Mark said everything I wanted to say. The question is, like, how are Marauders faring? Should anything change? The answer is yes, they need to change. They're oppressive in their current form. The problem is they do everything really well, and there's very little counterplay other than just bring more Marauders, which is not really good game balance. I think everything should have obvious counterplay. Like, you bring the Marauder, you should have to. In theory, you commit yourself to one location for a while. You sacrifice mobility, but it's just not the case in practice. I would like to see, for example, an easy change would be to reduce their application. So if you want to apply to small ships around you, then you have to fit for heavy application, maybe sacrifice DPS or tackle or something like that, and give up some of those abilities to hit small things. Or you can fit for maximum DPS until hit the big things, but if you get pinned down by small ships, you're kind of a bit stuffed. Yeah, they need to change, and they're not very well balanced. I think it's fine that they're an apex subcap. Like, I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think they're too apex.
Thank you, Ithaca. Ashley, you had something to say?
Yeah, even though I'm meant to be hosting this, I actually had something to say, which was just around Marauders. What's really interesting is the whole dynamic of how T2 ships are meant to be the specialized ships, and faction ships are generally the kind of more generic upgrade. So regarding specialization, making the Marauder good for PvE, right? We're all familiar with the whole CCP monkey paw thing of, like, CCP does something, but it kind of fucks something else over, or it breaks something entirely by doing it, even with good intentions. So there's a number of different things they could do, right? You know, they could make them really vulnerable to E-War. They could make them not be able to use E-War modules themselves. They could make them have worse tracking. They could make them have next to no buffer. I'm just going to ask Stitch, actually. Stitch, what do you think would be a devastating change that CCP could do to Marauders while trying to fix this problem? What would be a bad thing?
As in something that leads to CCP monkey paw?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, but I guess so. I guess the thing I would start with is we're looking at a lot of this from a PvP perspective. The monkey paw situation that I feel like CCP is trying to avoid by making changes to Marauders right now is they don't want to piss off the PvE players, because previously Marauders weren't being used, based on their metrics. Now everyone's using Marauders, and especially in the beginning when they changed them, I feel like a lot of their metrics were showing, oh, there's a bunch of people in HighSec using Marauders now. There's people in Anomalies using Marauders, or in Escalations, and now we're seeing them being used in C5 space, and that's great. They're getting used again. Everything's all hunky dory. The monkey paw situation I see is that they changed something that would be beneficial for us in a PvP scenario, but it's a detriment to people in PvE. So I guess an example would be Bastion changes. When Rise was doing the changes to Marauders, we had a podcast with him. I think it was in the Less Than 10 podcast, and he was like, yeah, we offered to go from 1 minute to 45 seconds, but people were still yelling at us and saying that was sitting still for too long. So Rise was just like, screw it, we're just going to take it to 30 seconds. And then, so people will stop complaining about it. So my monkey paw situation here is we want to take it back up to a minute, or we want to take it back to a minute and a half. And from a PvP perspective, we'd be happy about it. But from a PvE perspective and the metric side that CCP cares a little bit more about, is then a lot of PvE people might stop using them, or they'll continue complaining about them, and then CCP will do some kind of reverse core situation, and maybe they'll try and split the difference, and then we're back to square one again, where now we still have Marauders that are bastioning out in 45 seconds or something, and it doesn't really solve anything, and just ends up pissing everyone off.
Awesome. Okay. We don't have any other speakers, and we still have a bit of time on this topic, so I'm just going to ask another question to Mark this time. Mark, regarding balance in wormhole space, other than Marauders, how is the situation? Nighthawks.
I mean, Nighthawks were the obvious tipping point, right? Because of the kinetic bonus. They are a platform that does a lot of things really well, and they fit inside of fleets that support them really well, right? It is no secret that some of the the more experienced wormhole PvP groups started to gravitate towards Nighthawks when they did. Hawks has flown them for as long as anyone can remember at this point. They are a great platform, especially inside pulsars. They're really, really hard to beat. They and that shift, I think, they were a great command ship kind of mainline for a long time, even before the surgical strike changes, and surgical strike just compounded that issue, right? I think that's what we saw too when the ham issue came up, where after surgical strike, everybody started flying ham doctrines because all of your DPS was available up front. Your DPS applied perfectly within a certain range, and that range was generally considered the optimal brawling range within 0 to 16 kilometers, and you don't get the same thing from neutrons or I guess ink blasters, period, because of those limitations. So and it was a skill set that a lot of people already had access to because they liked enjoying other kind of doctrines that use the same stuff. So it was that to me was natural that it got to that point. Now, is that healthy? I'm inclined to say no. I have enjoyed flying. I mean, the Nighthawk was one of my favorite ships for the longest time, and I still like flying it. I think a lot of people would say the same thing. Do they need to be tuned back? Hard to say. And again, I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the meta shifting over time. That's one effect of that, right? Where now that we've introduced this huge new change, people are changing, their doctrines. They're changing, guys are skilling into things that they maybe didn't have skilled previously. And whether or not, that's going to be, these things are still going to be meta oppressive in the next couple weeks, couple months, year or so, is honestly impossible to say at this point. Anyone who's telling you otherwise is lying. So I think the better option would be for us to take a step back and say, what other ships or what other doctrines are not getting that same kind of attention right now, and what are things we could do to give people more options currently. I have said for the longest time that I don't really like the idea of breaking ships if we want to adjust the meta and making them worthless. Because in a lot of cases people like flying them, and if you break a ship and make it not worth flying anymore, sometimes people just they don't find the game as fun, and that eventually leads them to a point where they feel disenfranchised by the developers and by the game itself. So we've whined about the Proteus for the longest time. The balance changes to the Proteus recently didn't really quite do enough, but
I tried.
You did. Listen, it was not bad, but it wasn't. That's the kind of thing where I know people who love and swear by the Proteus, and the Proteus is not alone in this case, right? There are a lot of different
I think you'll
ships.
find the Proteus is fucking busted with web drones.
Okay,
I tried to get plus 200, but they only gave it plus 100 on the hybrid.
In one very specific recent situation, the Proteus was absolutely fucking busted. And outside of that situation, it has had less than optimal showing in most fleet fights. So, and she's now posted the link. Very good. Anyway, I guess the point I'm trying to get at here is that yes, there is a big meta shift happening right now. I don't think it's, or I think it's too early to say whether or not the previous meta strongholds, that being the Legion, the Nighthawk, the Loki, the Tengu, the DNI for some fleets. I don't know if it's or the Damnation too. I love the Damnation app. That's another a huge deal for a lot of groups, just because of how much survivability it has on grid. Whether those things are going to stick around in the face of the new battleship doctrines that we're starting to see, it's hard to say. But when these things are shifting around, I always think like, what are some other things that we could be introducing to the meta to, or other things we could be making more meta competitive that aren't currently competitive right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark.
welcome.
Jadek, I believe you wish to come and have a speak.
Hello, I'm Jadek of Incorruptibles. Came to play EVE online after Dust 514 shut down in 2016. Our group came from Dust and has been living in various wormholes for several years now. We were living in a C4 Wolf Riot and got our unanchoring timer interrupted on the 6th day by a couple folks shooting our shield in an off-time zone. Had no damage cap. They didn't end up showing for the armor structure timer, so rather than deal with another 7-day timer, we just decided to blow up the structure ourselves. I'm concerned that the removal of shield damage caps may encourage more blue ball, a Magi form for defenders without attackers having to significantly ante up for their initial shield attack. I feel attackers should be compelled with a mechanic of sorts to ante up their intention to return. For example, like a war clone garrison that attackers deploy to start shooting the shields, which defenders can redeem for ISK if attackers do not show.
So my issue with that is anytime you add more ISK to things, it's harder for small groups to afford it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jadek. I believe that was actually for the structures and evictions topic. But I believe, Kel, you actually had some stuff that you wanted to raise on that as well.
Yeah. So structures have seen actually a fair number of changes recently. I'm going to hit a couple of highlights sort of from small to big, I think. One smaller one, the change to the point defense system, so it now uses ammo. I'm sure there is at least one person in the room here who is very sad about that because they now have to spend a lot if they want to run their explorer traps. That's something that, just small thing, but I'm sure it affects some of us. The loss of bomb launchers from Astrahuses. Used to be that was, I felt like probably the most effective defensive tool that the Astrahus had. It is gone now. I know that the missiles got rebalanced somewhat. I don't know if other folks have seen a significance to that change. That doesn't seem to have done a whole lot. But then the big two, both for wormhole space, we've talked about frigate holes a whole bunch and how that affects evictions. And then the big one that was just mentioned, the removal of one timer from medium structures and the removal of the damage cap from the shield timer specifically. And I'm sure a lot of us here have already crunched these numbers. Used to be you get 4 Leshaks together, 3 if your people are particularly well skilled. You can hit damage cap on an Astrahus, get it done in about 24 minutes. If you want to get the shield done with those same 3 to 4 Leshaks, it takes about a little less than twice as long now. But because of the lack of the damage cap, you can pile on as much DPS as you can bring to bear and get things done very quickly. My guess, since this is just a guess, since I have not actually been in a situation of exploiting the lack of damage cap in a wormhole, is that you're probably bound now by how much mass you can actually get through your entrance hole, and that's where the sort of pseudo damage cap is coming from, if indeed there is one. I know I'd be very curious about people's experiences of how fast people are practically actually shooting those shields, because I don't know how that actually plays out.
Yes, so
I'd love to hear.
I would actually like to talk on this topic briefly. I know I'm moderating, but so after this change, we crafted a doctrine specifically for shooting small structures, well, the medium structures, of exec naval issues that are polarized, and they will finish a right arrow in about 1.5 minutes. They'll do an Astra in about 5 minutes, and then those corps have to be on like full alert because some of them have then lost their Astra, lost their right arrow a couple of days later. So I don't know. I'm not a massive fan of this change to structures, if I'm honest. I know it's like the combat fucking like the combat structure spam in K-Space, but that's not a problem in Wormhole Space, so we just get cooked by CCP yet again.
Can I just say something on that? This kind of goes to what I was talking about with balancing different parts of space differently. So this is a perfect example of it. It's a problem to solve, or a solution to solve a problem in K-Space that's affected J-Space completely differently. I would like to see, I mean, they already do it. There's already different timers in wormholes. It's already done. There's wormhole effects that don't exist in J-Space. There's ways to make the game different in J-Space. I just think we need to be more acknowledging of that difference and actually balance around it. Personally, when it comes to the shield timer, I'm not that bothered by it. I mean, my first 5 years in Wormhole Space were spent on pauses, which is basically camping. But you could easily one cycle a large pause with dreads. Like that was sub 5 minutes. You could reinforce a pause, no problem. And so being able to reinforce a structure in a couple of minutes is not a new thing. It's a return to an old style of E. And I like the fact that if you want to do that, then you have to commit a certain amount of assets. I would like it to be specifically around caps. I'd love to have it be maybe like dreads get a bonus to shooting Astras. So say, for example, you up the structure HP by 100%, but then you give dreads a special bonus where they do extra 100% damage to structures. You know, really give the dreads a purpose again. Being able to reinforce them in a couple of minutes isn't the issue. It's the fact that people are doing it with not very expensive doctrines. They're not putting many ships in space, and it's a way to counter structure spam that doesn't necessarily exist properly in W space.
Yeah, it's CCP monkey paw yet again. We are the unintended consequence, and we suffer for it, in my opinion.
It's important to always keep in mind with this that it hasn't been thought of properly for how people play in JSpace, but obviously it is intended to be part of addressing the disgusting behavior of structures in K-space. But I think that there's a suitable middle ground here, and I mentioned it at the beginning, but I want to reiterate it, is that what I'm going to be pushing is to have a very limited number of specific spots per system where citadels can go, and at those special spots they will have defensive capabilities far stronger than they currently have in this current nerfed state, and people are still able to anchor them elsewhere, but I would want to hurt the citadels even further than they have been that have been anchored away from those spots. And I think that this is a suitable middle ground solution that will help all areas of space, including having the ability to potentially solve this problem in JSpace.
You still got time here, Teddy?
Yeah, we got time.
Cool. I mean, yeah, this is, I think what part of the problem in this case is that CCP has rolled out something with the intention of providing a certain service or a certain functionality for pilots and corporations and alliances, but then didn't really follow through with it. And as a result, the players have turned it into something that it probably was not ever intended to do, right? So a lot of especially like K-Space Astra spam comes from groups wanting to have places of specific strategic importance where they could have effectively free immunity or free invincibility for a given period of time, because you can just go warp somewhere and tether, and now you are safe from any kind of possible engagement, or a place that you could dock up and stage out of quickly. It does, and so groups have used these much like the sort of forward operating base dynamic that people have talked about for a long time and people have been asking about for a long time, where the structure itself being positioned somewhere in space is less to do with actually using the structure for what it was originally intended, and is now being more used as just something that can either take up space or is a free place where you can tether up and be safe. Neither of which I think are particularly conducive to creating compelling gameplay. I like Phantomite's idea. I mean, I'm just going to say it straight up. I think his idea is maybe the best one I've heard so far with regards to how to fix this and not gimp out things for certain people. I also agree with Ithaca. I think this issue is less of an issue in wormholes with regards to structure spam, just by virtue of how little important it is for you to have an abundance of structures spread out across a lot of different systems. There are certainly some groups who have a lot of structures in their homes. That is certainly a thing, but any group is only as defensible as the fort won't defend itself. So that is, if the groups can't defend those structures, that will balance themselves out. I think you'll find that a lot of those groups who have a bunch of structures would find little difficulty defending those structures if the need arose. That being said, I think the issue is that we are in a position now where, for very little effort, any group of people kind of swinging through a wormhole can send a small or medium-sized group that relies on a certain structure, whether it be an Athanor, a Rataru, or an Astra, into full panic mode about maintaining and protecting their assets after just a single 5-10 minute excursion that cost them almost nothing. And it is frustrating for those groups, I imagine, that is the case when there are so many other options that we had for dealing with structure spam, or dealing with the defensibility of structures as a whole, which is something else that has been kind of harped on about at length, not just by Phantomite, though he perhaps is maybe the most vocal, but by plenty of other candidates too. So these are issues that are frustrating. I don't know if we're going to get that timer back anytime soon, but at least stressing to CCP the need to find a way to balance that with what were the structure intended uses, what was the structure originally intended to be used for, and is it meeting those intentions now, and if not, why?
Awesome, thank you, Mark. Cal, I believe you had something to raise on this.
Yeah, there's been a lot of good points already. One thing I want to highlight is that getting your structures shot outside of your time zone, for those of us who are in groups that are particularly heavily skewed towards one time zone, 5 minutes versus 25 minutes versus 1.5 minutes ultimately doesn't make a difference. So I think it's important to sort of say that that's not the issue. The issue is that it is someone does a drive-by, and then you do not have a timer when you can show up and find out, are they actually serious about this? If you choose to guess that they're not serious and they are, then your structure blows up. And for any group that's large enough to drop a Fortizar, this is not an issue. You just switch to a Fortizar now. But for a lot of groups that are smaller, I remember back in Sound's earlier days in Wormholes, one of the things that we talked about was if any of these larger groups decides to evict us, we'll get evicted. End of story. That is how we thought about it. And I'm guessing that that's something that a lot of smaller groups are thinking about right now as well. So our defense was to make it annoying and time consuming enough that they would get bored of doing so. That was our defense. It worked for us. I don't know how I feel about that as a defense. To be honest, I have to think about this more, but that's just something that is on my mind here.
Awesome, thanks, Cal. Right, let's move on to a new topic. So this one is from a request. So this is conflict drivers and wormhole space. As a lot of you may know, there isn't really a lot of conflict drivers in wormhole space at the moment. And certainly since the Rorke was removed, well, moons were removed, there's been even less. But to just kick it off for a moment, Mark, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, this harkens back to basically everything we've been saying over the last 3 or 4 years. I think the community as a whole, and at least for myself and some of the others here, certainly within the last couple of times we've done this, wormhole space is very much currently centered around 2 specific metas, right? With regards to content generation, you have the content generation of established honor brawls, and then you have the content generation of finding group. I'll say 3 because I think the last 2 are different enough. You've got brawls between 2 groups that are pre-established, you've got people hunting crabs, and you have evictions, and that is content currently in JSpace, and none of it is particularly compelling. Evictions, I've gone at length before, and I know different people have different opinions about this. I think evictions are about the most dull thing you can do in JSpace. I've had plenty of good experiences with evictions and have enjoyed both defending and performing evictions, but those experiences are very few and far between, and the rest of the time is just sitting around looking at wormholes, and that's not really very compelling. For crab hunting, generally, since people are going to be rolling off their holes anyway, unless you're lucky to find a static or a frig hole rather that you can sneak through that somebody hasn't been diligent on. The only way you're getting into find people crabbing is if you roll into them, and that means having to rage roll, which again, rage rolling is okay as a way to find content, but it is not a content generator and it is also not very compelling. And then the last thing, of course, is honor brawls, which are the best of the three options so far, but relying on two groups to, one, have a connection, two, have people available. It is not organic content, and the best content so far, I think a lot of people I've spoken to specifically all agree that content that evolves organically because of two groups interacting with each other on accident is always more interesting. Maybe not as big and dramatic, but that's certainly more interesting than content that evolves because two groups set it up. So we've had a lot of different ideas about this. There are certainly some things that could be implemented. Vincent earlier talked about Rorquals and putting Rorquals back in the game, or at least back in J-Space. I am on board with this and have been harping about it now for 2 years, and I think it is a solution to a lot of our problems. Whenever I mention about it, a lot of nullsec candidates generally get nervous and think I'm advocating for Rorks Online, which is simply not true. I understand they were fully broken in the in the meta that they were in, and that's unfortunate. But again, different regions of space can do different things, and they can certainly have value out here. The Rorqual is a big target that has to be on grid for a certain amount of time, and it is in the best interest of the people who are fielding the Rorqual to defend it, both because it generates money for them and because it costs a ton of money to put into place. That kind of thing, making gas worth more, finding new ways to harvest gas, making that a content driver. These are all different options we have, but currently there's nobody sitting at the table, to say, listen, we've got these three things. It's not very interesting. We'd like to have more things to do. And so I think that is why, a lot of us at least have vouched for this in the past, and hopefully going forward.
I'm gonna cut you off there.
Yep,
Mark.
I got you there, big guy.
So we got Abu. If you want to come on in and say your piece.
Hey, sorry, I was just buying out the Paladin market, so you guys can't use them. So I wrote up a little suggestion, just called adding objectives to Wormhole Space, and keeping in mind that this subject is being approached from the current ESS null mechanics that we have. But no way should it be limited to those mechanics, and it's just done to provide a relevant reference point for the suggestion. So we have a lack of strategic objectives in Wormhole Space, as Mark discussed earlier, and there's not much to attack or defend in a specific wormhole. And none of the, or very few of the other content drivers actually provide tangible benefits, such as score materials, other than mining, which we don't have currently. So this proposed objective might be a better content starter by reducing the stakes for both sides compared to an eviction, which has very high stakes, and provides enough reward to both incentivize attackers and also enough consequence to incentivize defenders. So the introduction of the ESS and specifically reserve banks in nullsec is interesting because if you applied a similar concept to Wormhole Space, it represents an objective that builds up value over time, either with the resources or ISK. And it can be robbed by a group, and it has a mechanic where there's a delayed payout system. The longer you commit to the grid, the more money you make, or more money you steal. So in Wormhole Space, this could include collecting percentage of blue loot rather than a system, the salvage, ancient relics, gas, whatever else I can't really think of right now. And it could also end with a larger group site to do, as old, I think, capital sites or home sites that people used to do, where you require a fleet to do them. They're committed to grid, and they pay out a massive reward, which increases the value of home sites for a larger group. So this kind of ESS bank system should at least encourage attacking groups to hold the objective grid to deter fights where you fight averse fleet composition. You want defending groups to contest the objective grid by offering in-game consequences. Sorry, there's a spider on me. Okay.
Getting randomly
Rewards
attacked by
should
spiders.
directly
Spiders
correlate.
oppressing what Jay's face did.
Rewards should directly correlate or relate to the wormhole ecosystem without relying on instantaneous wallet payouts, which is current case-based bounty mechanics. I think the blue loot system is a lot better because it can be intercepted even after being redeemed, and it should be from accumulated resources over time. So it should be something that you build up in your wormhole, and it can be robbed at any time, but it's better for it to build up over longer time, so it's a juicier target.
Yeah, I feel like that's actually been raised. I don't want to turn this into a debate, but I just wanted to quickly comment. I feel like this has been raised for years, and but yeah, hold your horses there, Mark. We have a fucking list.
I know it's just.
I'll just post it. I just posted it.
Yeah, this is something that Captators Group worked on for a long time. The same kind of idea, and it is really. I mean, it is a good option.
Yeah. Anyway, Ithaca, I believe you wanted to speak on this as well.
Yeah. So, content generation in W space has always been an interesting one. The way I think it differs a lot from the rest of the game is that anything like objectives and reasons to do anything, it's pretty much made by the players, and it's not set out like a null. There's no ADMs to raise. Don't have to go out sob wanding. If I want to go, fuck with Laserhawks, I just have to go fuck with Laserhawks. I don't have to get into a bunch of closest shit and go start turning off jump bridges and doing all sorts of inane bullshit. I can just get in there and start fighting them. The problem is that's really difficult at the minute. And one of the reasons that is there is a lack of people in space and lack of caps in space. And one of the things that I would say that I do agree with is about the old sighting crews. So I want to go back to, say, 2015. Like, take your minds back. I know this sounds like I'm saying back in my day we had to scan the chain uphill both ways in the snow. But in, 2015, you had home sites with capital escalations. So you would have your sighting crew, which have a couple of dreads, a couple of carriers, a couple of subcaps, and you would be in these sites. They would pay out quite handsomely, but you had multiple caps committed to that site, and those sites could kill caps quite easily. So if you wanted to, you had to commit those caps to earn money. And because of that, money was good, and people were enjoying flying in caps, lots of people lived in the W space. So back in those days, when you rage rolled, it wasn't just the sort of endless hours of nothing like it is today. It was pretty much group after group after group, with just more people there. You would roll into people's sighting. You would just send them a couple of pictures, bubble their sighting crew, jump in some caps, warp in, and suddenly you had a cap brawl. And if you look at the number of caps dying in W space, basically the day they introduced force auxiliaries and changed triage carriers and got rid of the old capital escalation sites and brought in the drifters, it just falls off a cliff. And that killed a lot of people's playstyles. So people left. They left the high-class W space. So I think for content generation, you just need caps in space. Bring back things like this old site. I would love to see things like the C6s get a bit of a boost for livability rather than just farms, so that you have the group moving up to there, because there's less of them. So you roll your C6 static, it's much easier to find them. Give them a second static, for example. C2s have one, C4s have one, C6 doesn't. So I'd like to see C6 highway with lots of groups in there. At the end of the day, it has to be getting more people into the ecosystem, because it's all well and good bringing on these objectives and like an ESS and stuff like that. But if wormhole space is just mostly farms and very few people actually there for content, you can't force people to fight you. You never can. You have to basically encourage people to put their stuff into space so you can go fight them without their permission. And that's the way I think you get more content here.
Cool. Thanks, Ithaca. And to close out this topic, once Stitch is done, we will be moving into sort of an open topic. If you haven't had anything, any topics that you wanted to sort of speak about, then once Stitch is done, just raise your hand. This when we'll transition to more open format.
So the main thing I wanted to add in here is regarding, obviously we talked about objectives and things like that, is that I wanted to talk about like decoupling low class and high class. So low class, everyone talks about blue loot, but blue loot is pretty much irrelevant in low class. I've done a lot of the PvE sites in low class, and C3s can do okay, but like C1, C2, it's kind of pointless. And in the past, a lot of things people don't talk about anymore is that low class wormholes were viable with wormhole salvage. Well, wormhole salvage isn't really useful anymore. I mean, it's useful obviously for building T3s, but it's lost a lot of its value because T3s have lost a lot of their value as far as being a heavily utilized doctrine chip. So decoupling that and making low class focus more on like salvage, and obviously we need to get salvage back to something valuable that gives a little bit of things to fight over, or at least makes it worth those sites. But then going back to what Mark was talking about with like the Rourke, and it was mentioned in the past as well, there are ways to make the Rourke utilized specifically in wormholes where it's not used in K-space. So we're not getting that overlap. Obviously the gas harvesting is maybe one option, which, there are gas sites in K-space as well. But I was more thinking along the lines, and this kind of goes along with the ESS mechanic of, as you kill sleepers, you are actually creating like a quote unquote salvage yard. And then you need a Rorqual to mine the salvage yard with like capital salvagers, which then puts a Rorqual on field, and it creates like a location to fight around. So then you're able to, have that set piece. People can steal your salvage, which you've accumulated, and again, it gives interaction. Again, it gives an objective in space. Obviously, that's a very simple description of it. I'm not going to go through every single detail, but it's just an idea that came to me while we were talking about it.
Awesome. Before we transition to open format, Alvianti wants to also speak on this.
Yeah, so I would definitely caution against any form of an ESS in wormhole space. And the reason why is that the ESS typically has a stated value that you can steal from it. And what ends up happening is pilots in space who are grinding this ISK will do the math and say, my ship is worth 5, 10, or 20 times what you can take from me. I'm not going to go and fight you for it. And my concern is that, let's say someone comes after your ESS and you go, well, our heavy armor fleet's 150 to 200 billion ISK. I'm not going to put that at risk over a tiny amount of ISK. Or what they will do is they will roll the wormhole you came in from while you're stuck in the ESS, so you can't haul the loot out. I would definitely go with more towards what Ithaca was saying and Mark, which is you need ships in space that don't have a stated value to fight over. You will get much more success from that.
Awesome. Thank you, Alvianti. We are going to move on to more of an open topic. We did have Bruce. Do you still want to speak?
Yeah, thank you. Sure. On the more open thing though, if that's fine.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I've been hearing a lot, what I think is an issue with the game, is that there are not very many softer-ish PvP targets. It's always like all or nothing, like with the Astra, and that's also an issue for when I want to go out and find content. Is there's nothing actually my size to shoot at and that I can get anything out of. I can like scan a lot, but either it's like way too big for me, or it's impossible to tackle, or even unreasonable to tackle, like a whole structure. And I think that's also an issue in nullsec. So maybe that's something you can take with you and propose. I don't know, to think about.
Awesome. Thank you, Bruce. Dewey.
Yes, thank you. I would like to add to the topic of the ESS in the wormholes. I think that's also kind of fucks with the general like feel of wormhole space. I feel like wormholes are very unique in this, where you feel kind of, you know, alone, deserted with your group, and yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a very thematic thing that's very important to wormhole space. I'm not sure if y'all get what I mean, but like, yeah,
It feels like a frontier.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
like a frontier. That's a good word.
Yeah.
What something that is missing from huge areas of space is something that we've gone over already, which is blended PvE and PvP. Like there needs to be more PvE around many areas of the game that requires that you be in a fleet of multiple pilots, so that there is reasons to be in space in something that doesn't have to run because it's PvE fit specifically. I think that this could be a great content thing basically everywhere in space.
Yeah,
And I think that I would look at I think that would be a far more valuable addition than like an ESS.
Yeah, exactly. I think like sites that are like Porchfin or something like that. I think that would be a good addition. Thank you for
Awesome.
giving.
Thanks, Dewey. As a quick aside, yeah, I kind of agree with a lot of that. To me, Wormhole Space, I think a lot of the mentality is kind of what makes Wormhole Space so special. But anyway, Kristen, come on in.
Yes. Hi, guys. Sorry, I was a bit late to joining this, so I'll apologize if I ask something that may have already been brought up. But I'm just kind of curious, what would be your thoughts towards, maybe like enabling some kind of development of wormhole space? We go down into these systems, set up structures, take up residence, and basically try to make this our home, but really don't have any capability to truly own the neighborhood, as you will, like you do out in, nullsec. So, I mean, what would you guys' thoughts be on, maybe being able to set up, some kind of structure to be able to provide like basic services, whether that's, like a local chat or, even just, I don't know,
I'm gonna stop you a local chat.
combat site generator. I'm just saying,
well,
local services and stuff like that, but to further reinforce and develop
Yeah.
the system.
I actually have a big thing for this one because we've been talking a lot about the potential ESS, and I think that the issue with an ESS is that it is intrinsic to the system, right? It's not something that you can't go bash the ESS, right? Killing the ESS offers you no value, right? So for a target, it really just depends on who's willing to contest the ESS, and if the ESS isn't valuable enough, then nobody's going to come show up. What I prefer personally is an idea that we worked out last year, where you could imagine an anchorable structure, not something that you can dock in, but an anchorable structure that costs a certain amount of money, nothing crazy to start, but over time it generates value for itself and for its inevitable wreck. Right. So imagine a situation where you anchor this thing in your system, you put a core into it. Okay, the core costs 500 million ESC when you put it in. Okay, over time, that core becomes more valuable. It changes. It becomes a thing that you could sell for more money over time. At the same time, while it's doing that, it is also offering significant benefits to the system that you're in. Right? Maybe it's increasing your combat site spawn rate, or increasing the amount of gas that's kicking out in your system, or increasing the frequency of the belts that spawn in your system, or any number of things. Right? This thing is worthwhile to defend in your own home because it is making your home more valuable over time. Right? And those benefits would then increase, up to a certain point again over time. Whereas somebody who's coming through space and sees you with this thing now that has made your hole intrinsically more valuable, would want to kill it because they're not getting any benefit from the fact that your hole is more valuable. All they know is that now that thing that you put in there that was worth 500 million ISK is now worth 10 billion ISK if they sell it, right? And that's a big amount of money up front for them for, relatively little effort. Whereas for you, it's not worth 10 billion ISK. It's worth 50 to 100 billion ISK because of how much money you're making from it by virtue of living in the hole where it is active. So when people talk about, cultivating their homes or making their homes feel more like something that they, can interact with, that is, I think, at least a more creative offers a chance for more creative content. That I know you're about to tell me
Just time back.
Yeah. I guess I'll just to wrap it up. It is I like the idea of something that is worthwhile to fight over and also worthwhile to defend at the same time, without being an eviction.
Yeah. And that was a really good point. I can't remember who the fuck you were in TD Sin, but that was a good point. Rip, you're up. You muted, buddy.
I really appreciate everybody being here, and I've heard a lot of great ideas, but my real question is, do you really trust CCP to ever focus on wormholes? Not in the sense that they won't ever focus on wormholes, but if they were to focus on wormholes, would you trust them not to screw it up? Wouldn't the wormhole candidates be better off deflecting CCP away from wormholes based on their history of unintended consequences? Thanks. So
I know that CSM probably want to answer this question a lot because it is a really good question. So I'm going to give you guys like 10 words to answer this question with because we don't have a lot of time left.
Can I take one?
Sure, go ahead.
The alternative to trying is dying.
Very succinct.
Yep, Olivia, I was going to say the same thing. If you don't try and fix it, then you accept what you have now is the best you'll ever have. And I think that would be a very sad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I just said it a second ago in chat, but I would rather have some ideas at the table than no ideas, period.
The most major wormhole changes that have happened without a proper wormhole candidate present, at least in the past few years.
So you're struggling there, Stitch. It's okay. Cal, Avianti, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, sort of along the lines of what Stitch said. I think if you want bad things to not happen to wormhole space, you want CCP's focus on wormhole space, because otherwise we get to be collateral damage, as has been said.
So I will say that CCP has listened to us in the past and made some changes, especially when we've thrown tantrums when they've screwed things up.
Awesome.
Yeah,
right.
They fixed the filaments, didn't they?
Eventually.
Shit happens.
Eventually.
Yeah.
Right, we're going to move on. This is going to be the last thing. I just wanted to go through all of the CSM real quick. From what you guys have heard from the wormholers that have spoken and things that were raised, what seems to be the biggest issue that wormhole space is facing right now? I'll start with Cal.
Reading between the lines a little bit, it is getting people out in space to be content for other people. And I'll put my own spin on that a little bit. I don't think anyone said this explicitly, but we've talked a fair amount about things in people's homes. But I think that my impression and my understanding is that one of the things we ought to be looking at is how to get people in space uncloaked, not in their home hole. whether that's in your static or ideally even farther than that, so that we can have those open chain interactions, the spontaneous interactions where it's like honor brawls are great, but we should have other stuff too if we want to have a really healthy ecosystem.
Awesome. Ithaca.
So the biggest problem with the free space is there's two really. One is in-game, which is the mechanics of the game are just not really suited to the way people want to play the game right now in W space. That is to say, all the unintended consequences, killing, gameplay styles, and things like that. Just kind of across the board. So no cats in space, no people living in there except for farmers who just want to farm in peace. And the second is the kind of the driver of the first, which is that CCP haven't really given the attention to W space that is needed for many years. Pretty much they put it in the game, thought, hey, this is a cool little thing, no one will actually take it seriously. And then a bunch of groups all moved into it and then created this whole type of gameplay that no one saw coming. And that lasted for many years and was fantastic. And they've not really known how to recapture that. So they haven't tried. And I think that if they tried, if they focused some attention on it, then it could be really, really good. Like there's so much passion in Wormhole space. Like how many other groups organize town halls like this and have people from across the community come to them? Not very many. Wormholes are so impassioned that whenever someone from one of the old groups that collapsed 10 years ago runs, and you were in a group that didn't like them, then you're like, I'll never vote for them. They're the old enemy. It's just Wormholers love what they do, and they deserve to be acknowledged for that. People need to actually put dead time into doing it. So that's my opinion on what's wrong in W space. Just want to quickly say I need to boost. So thank you very much for inviting me to this. I think there's a lot of great candidates on the CSN this year that will take Wormhole space seriously. I've got Mark on my ballot. A couple of the guys here, Alavente, Stitch, and Fant, some really great ideas for how to do things, and they've got knowledge of W space. So I think it's a good year to get some W space representation on the CSN. I hope I can be on some of your ballots. I would love that. If you think I can represent you, of course. Yeah, that's me, Pedagogue. See you in space, and thanks for having me.
See you, Ithaca. Right, Phantomite, what is your biggest problem in Wormhole space as you see it?
I can't pick between two, but it's a lack of defensibility of basic structures to live in, which I already think I have a solution for. And Marauders being too powerful in both PvE and PvP roles.
That is succinct. I was expecting a long answer.
I think it's both reasonable ways to say things.
That is right,
why
Mark.
use many word?
What I think the biggest issue with JSpace is right now, I think the biggest issue is that we have a sweeping silent host of people who have spent time in JSpace and have loved living in JSpace, and over time those people have become disenfranchised and disillusioned with a play style that they used to really enjoy and now find no joy in participating with. And we have to, as a community, and for the sake of the CSM representation, with the devs as well, find creative ways to convince those people that the game is still worth playing. And the biggest way that we can do that is by making the game worth playing and doing common sense things to try and bring people back. It makes sense for us. It makes sense for CCP because they want that money and we got that money. So yes, that's the biggest problem with the game right now. Or why I'll say with the game, but also with JSpace. The fact that we have people who have left and who want to come back, but they don't want to come back until the game is worth playing. And they haven't made the game worth playing yet, so they're not going to come back. If we can fix that, we'll save Eve, but we can't do it until we fix that first. That's all I got.
I guess.
Yes,
Steve. Next up is Stitch.
Yeah,
I think. Yep, Stitch.
So, yeah, kind of following off of what Mark said there, kind of there needs to be a reason for people to come back. So I know there's kind of a lot of people sitting kind of in the outskirts of Eve, whether it's Reddit or just hanging out on their old discords, kind of waiting for that thing to come back. At least for wormholes, and the same applies to low sec and a lot of areas of space, to be honest. But for wormholes in particularly, it's more that, and this has already been discussed, but it's so intertwined with everything else, which is there needs to be more content drivers. There needs to be a reason for people to be out in space. Whether that's some kind of ESS mechanic or just rebalancing the sites, changing marauders, changing how things interact with capitals. There needs to be set pieces for people to interact with, and once those objectives are back, then those people will start coming back because they'll actually have content to engage in. Right now wormhole space is just, granted we use our nullsec primarily, but I still roam the chain frequently. And for me, as just like a casual observer of wormhole space and roaming through it, I'll get maybe 5 fights in a year, just randomly roaming the chain, because I don't have any way to interact with someone in their hole in a casual manner without just like typing in local. But then that kind of defeats the purpose of bait or trying to get an organic fight. So if there's some way to engage there, to say, hey, I'm here, come fight me, then I feel like that would help generate more content. And again, in general, just like having dreads, rorks, whatever out things for people to fight over would get more people back in that space and engaging in the content.
Thank you very much. Steve Fronican, you're not a wormholer, you're the third-party tools guy, but having listened to everyone here over the last 2 hours, what to you sounds like the biggest problem for wormhole space?
It's sounding like it's. I don't want to say conflict drivers, because a conflict driver is not a big enough term. It's the ability to have conflict without it being all or nothing, but that blends into the reasons to have people out in space to do stuff, which is to have fun, but that's then to make those people vulnerable enough that having something to do, so they do it, but not so valuable that you take out the huge stuff, which you then will do your level best to never lose. So you then get the fights for people who come in. So it's that blend of activity, which sounds like it's where stuff is needed.
Awesome, great. Alaventi, you're up next. What's the biggest problem in wormhole space as you see it?
I mean, so as we've been talking today, 4 big things stand out in my mind. They are balancing of ships, balancing of structures, getting people to undock, and giving them a reason to fight. And so I will say that the biggest problem affecting wormhole space right now is that you don't have an advocate on the CSM. You have a plethora of wonderful candidates. I think anyone who's been chatting with you guys today would be an excellent candidate. So please get out and vote. Please vote and fill all 10 of your slots. Don't have your vote get thrown out because you didn't fill out your ballot completely. And hopefully we can get ourselves a CSM candidate that can work with the other CSM candidates, and we can get good changes for wormhole space.
That's a very, very good point. In case anyone doesn't know, the votes use a single transferable vote system. If the chosen candidate that you have at number 1 doesn't get in, then your vote gets passed down. Right, with that, we'll move on to the last person who hasn't talked, which is, where did Wins go? He's gone. All right, no, we lost Wins and Tosish. Okay.
Yeah, he had to leave a little bit earlier.
Yeah, okay, apparently I'm blind. I think that is, that's it, unless we've got anything else. Teddy?
No, I believe that is it. Truly, guys, thank you all for coming, and thanks all the guys that are listening on the stream as well, and thanks to all the CSM that have turned up. I hope this is helpful to any CSM that do get on, so they can carry the torch to CCP. Otherwise, we can try and use this to give community sentiment to CCP as well. I will try and do this again next year for the next CSM election. But yeah, truly, guys, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us, guys. Thanks for throwing this together.
Thank
This
you.
is really fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.